I'll call this meeting of the Woodford County Fiscal Court Ordinance Committee to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Squire Gill.
Here.
Squire Blackford.
Present.
Squire Downey. And Judge Executive Kay.
Yes, ma'am. All right. So we are properly noticed to have a special meeting of the Ordinance Committee for discussion of the Article 2 and 7 changes that were recommended from the Planning Commission to the Fiscal Court that were sent back to the Planning Commission. And we are here to work on a recommendation to the Planning Commission. And so I would open up the floor for anyone to begin the discussion. Squire Gill, you're recognized.
I might as well.
Well, I knew.
Since the Planning Commission requested a moratorium and we turned it down, there have been dozens of small lots carved up in the county between family conveyance and A4 zone changes, and the potential for dozens more. So, I only say that to just hopefully that we can expedite this and get this back to them as soon as possible. I know there were some, I went to their last meeting, and there was another zone change down in Nonsuch request that they've tabled, but it would potentially create another dozen 1 acre lots down in Nonsuch. And that some of that A4 language is in the Articles 2 and Article 7, so hopefully we can get to that. But in talking to people in the community and the Planning Commission, I put at your station just some starting points and see what you think about them. To strike the in-family conveyance and exception lot language and keep the remaining amendments to Articles 2 and 7. And then I put except on page 23 as noted below. I scratched that out because what they've done in the proposed amendment that we sent back is that they decreased the road frontage in A4 from like 150 to 100, the minimum lot width from 150 to 50. I think they're going to revisit that and see if they can, after that, I mean, they just had a rash of these requests for 1 acre lots in the A4 zone. So they're looking to redo that when it goes back to them. But I'd like to ask the Planning Commission to add the following to the in-family conveyance language: that the applicant must be a Woodford County resident, that an affidavit must be signed stating that farming is occurring on all parcels. And they've actually got an affidavit if you all want to see it. I got that from Planning and Zoning. You want to take a look at that. Number 3, the primary farm parcel may never be reduced below 30 acres. In-family conveyance is no longer an option at that point. And there can be one in-family conveyance for 35 to 49 acres and 2 for 50 acres and above. And if they say, well, I have more kids than that, well, they have other options. If you have 100 acres, you can do a rural residential zone. You can do accessory dwellings. You can give them 30 acres. So there are other options for conveying property to your family. The conveyed parcel must not be less than 5 acres and located on a public road, because in KRS a farm is 5 acres. The problem with having the parcel not on a public road is that someday most of those are going to be sold. As history has proven that most of them are sold in 5 years, then it's landlocked, and it creates a big problem with providing services, as we've seen down there on Rose Lane. And then both the primary and the conveyed parcel must be held for X number of years. I'm saying 15, and can only be sold by judicial action. In case of death or bankruptcy or divorce or whatever whatever the courts say, I think that's all in the law. And then it can only be conveyed from a parent to a legal child or grandparent to grandchild. and the restrictions must be recorded on the plat. I had said before to put it on the deed too, but planning and zoning doesn't have anything to do with deed conveyance. They don't have any way to patrol that, but they can get it, a note put on the plat. And I just put that out there as a starting point to see what you all think.
So the one thing that I would clarify as we move forward is there was some very brief discussion of a moratorium. In fact, moratorium discussion in this court goes back to the potential discussion of moratoriums brought up about barrel warehousing. And we were given an understanding of the process and potential consequences of a moratorium. And at any time, any member of this fiscal court could have asked the county attorney to draft a moratorium. You could have worked on a moratorium yourself. In fact, one of the three options at our last meeting was a middle option to effectively enact a moratorium, which would have ended these processes, and this committee nor the fiscal court recommended that. So I just want to say that if these are the things that you or anyone else thinks that we need to do, then we need to be clear about that. But there was no point in time that a formal request for a moratorium was ever brought up. We don't have the numbers. You said that dozens of in-family conveyances have happened since this discussion has began, but I have not seen the numbers on that. Are you aware of those figures?
Well, I know in December alone, it was 14. And we got the request, and I only brought that up to say that in the meantime, not that we should have done a moratorium, but since that time that request was made, there have been dozens of 1 acre lots carved up in the ag zones. And I know there were 14 in December. This was, I can't remember what month it was that they requested that. It was last fall. And then every month since then, there have been more. And I did confirm that with planning and zoning that there have been dozens, but I can't give you the exact number.
Try to get that number at our next opportunity. I appreciate that, Squire Gill, and I just so you know, I wasn't referencing that you were saying that we needed a moratorium, but there has been some discussion about a moratorium. I just wanted to make it clear that at no point was that brought up in a way to push that forward as a specific policy of the court. I know that Squire Varner did mention that, but there was no, we didn't vote that down, we didn't vote that up, that was never a motion made. So I just want to say that a moratorium, for better or worse, regardless of how you feel about it, has not been a formal option of the court or this committee to consider. So, other discussions about Squire Gill's recommendation? Squire Blackford.
Yes, thank you, Judge. After hearing those residents who have property on the rural counties and hearing their discussion and passion about the family conveyance, I'm feel very moved by their passion and their need for wanting family and relatives to come back on the property there, to be able to live there as residents on the property. I think it's very important that we keep that 30-acre family conveyance still with them, and maybe extend the years on the lot there, for they can do anything to take that action on the property. I think it's also important that we maybe even down to the one, I like these what Marion Gill is saying here. There's some of the feedback I got when I was talking to parents, and my parents, I mean talking to residents that live on those properties, is that maybe even an adopted child, though, could be added on number 6, you know, other than the legal child or grandparent or grandchild, and maybe an adopted child also could be added in that. But other than that, I feel strong about them being able to maintain the property, those who had started and had the right attitude and approach about what they did when we first had the 30 acres for family conveyance. I think it's very strong that we keep it for them.
Squire Blackford. Squire Gill?
I agree with Squire Blackford. That probably needs to be fixed. We shouldn't add direct descendant. I think you're right. It needs to be a legal child, grandchild. That could be an adopted child. That could be a stepchild.
So it would be a direct heir. Squire Gill, do you want to go through each of the points, the numerical paragraphs, and discuss those in more detail? Yes, Mr. County Attorney. I said heir, but Mr. County Attorney, you want to clarify? You can turn on your mic.
Looking for blood, and then you just referenced adopted, and I don't know, because there could be a distinction there, and I don't know what I'm not suggesting one way or the other. I want to make sure I don't know what it is you all want to do. If you want to say it has to be a bloodline, you should use descendant.
Right.
If an adopted child could be an heir. So again, I don't know what you all want, but you should think about that in deciding what word to use.
Well, the whole point of the ordinance was to keep a farm and convey it to
Yes.
family. And a family is an adopted child or
So-
a stepchild, or so, not the direct descendant, probably heir, as the judge said.
Okay, that's why I wanted to make sure you all knew the distinction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to go through each one of these, Judge?
We can, yeah.
First of all, the applicant must be a Woodford County resident. Well, I think that's important because we've seen lots of examples. A lot of those, there's been a lot of abuse from people who just come in and speculate, buy a piece of property, carve it up for their kids, sell the primary parcel, make some quick money, and hold on to it for 5 years, and then they sell all the rest of it. That wasn't the intent of the original language, so I think we might prevent that if the applicant has to be a Woodford County resident, because the whole point of this is to save a Woodford County farm.
Yes, I think that's important. I do think there are, you folks would have the ability to become a resident and take advantage of this in a quick opportunity. There's no like lengthy process to become a resident of the county.
Right.
But I agree wholeheartedly that it should be county residency. All right, other thoughts on number one? Number two?
The affidavit must be signed stating that farming is occurring on all parcels, and there is an affidavit. Did you see that, Judge? That's from planning and zoning. He said he would have to tweak that to add some language that has to be recorded on the plat, that has to be recorded that farming is taking place. He said he would have to tweak that, but that would be a planning and zoning issue. But that's basically what it would look like. I believe that's not new. That's something they already use.
Judge,
Mr. County.
so do you want to say that the planning and zoning approved affidavit form must be completed? Because if it just says affidavit, a person can come in, have sworn to something before a notary and say, well, this complies. So you want it to be their form affidavit, however they change it. Okay.
Exactly. Thank you.
I'm trying to see in this affidavit, what if during the time period or process that they no longer farm the land or no longer can abide by the affidavit? What would be the situation then?
I don't know if there's even, a lot of this, there's no way to police it, but to get this process started, that's what they would have to do. I'm not sure that they really could. On down the road, say, you know, you're not farming this. They can't undo it after it's been sold. But that's kind of the best we've got right now, to stick to the original intent of the ordinance, which is to save a farm.
Other questions about the affidavit requirement? Seeing none. Number 3.
The primary farm parcel may never be reduced below 30 acres. In-family conveyance is no longer an option at that point. And then 1 in-family conveyance for 35 to 49 acres. They would have to still keep that primary piece 30 acres, they'd have to have a minimum of 35 acres to parcel out a piece to a child or grandchild. And then 2 for 50 acres and above. That was the recommendation from the Planning Commission in the amended articles that they sent to us recently and that we have since sent back. But they recommended that when they were talking about exception lots. And so, and that was the question that Squire Downey had when he was here. He said, bigger problem is how many can they do? You know, when somebody like the 30 acres down there, where was that, near Kids Mill, was divided into six plots on 30 acres. And we're trying to avoid that.
Yeah, Squire Brown. Yes, sir.
Don't we have in our books that if you got 30 acres, don't you have to have more to put a house on it? Because your house takes, say, an acre, or we don't have that. I thought we had that. And then I thought they changed it like road frontage. Used to be you go to the middle of the road, now you just go to the edge of your property. But maybe they never did do that. I know at one time they were talking about that.
Squire Brown, I don't have the answers to those questions.
Okay.
But I have the articles in front of me. Can anybody else assist Squire Brown with that question?
I believe right now you can.
Do you mind to turn on the mic?
I believe, Squire, right now you can have 1 acre tracts so long as they are developed under the rural residential. And to do that, they have to be off the road 400 feet.
Yeah.
If they are on the road, they have to meet the road frontage requirements. And I believe they have to be 5 acres. I think that's correct. I may be wrong on that. And if you have a parcel, let's say, of 30 acres, you could theoretically have 5 dwelling units on the property, but they can't be divided into lots. They have to be like a residence and then tenant homes or something like that. And you can do that. If you have a 100-acre farm, you can theoretically have a residence for every 5 acres. That wouldn't happen logically if you were farming, but you can do that. But if you want to divide it and make it a separate lot, then it has to be 400 feet off the road, has to meet the sliding scale for the number of acres you have, and you have to preserve 80% of your farmland. You can only develop 20% of it. So that's the current law.
That is, if you go through all those steps, we do away with these steps, and then what happens then?
You'll follow the new law.
And you're, okay, gotcha.
And to that point, Assistant County Attorney, so when you say follow the new law, you mean the rest of the proposed changes in
Right.
2 and
Right.
7? that
Whatever
were-
is adopted by the commission and the court.
Thank you. Continuing on that track.
Number
So,
4.
You want to move to number 4? Okay. Anybody else have anything on number 3? Squire Varner?
I just want to say, with the new wording, that if it gets adopted, would be 10 lots at 2 acres per lot.
That's great.
Which you had when you got to the 100 acres on the new wording,
Yeah,
Rural residential.
rural residential,
you're going to go from 15 lots
to 10.
10 lots.
That'd be 2 acre lots instead.
But everything else, say you start coming back to the road and stuff, what happens then? because it's all set up on rural residential. It's set up right now that if you have a farm, you divide it up like Trey Schott did in 7 lots. All right, and which I reckon that'd be 210 acres. These got to go off the road with all of them. But when you start changing all this, like rural residential, and you're talking about 5 acres come back to the road and stuff, all this was set up years ago to follow. If you don't do what they asked you to do, you lose your spots. Like if you come to the road and you build a house about 400 feet on, then you lost maybe 6 lots or 7 lots. So when you start changing all of it, you got to be real careful how you change it, unless you want to go back to the roads again and use it up that way. Because the reason why they did that is because when it's all said and done, a lot of people don't want them building out in the county, but you're going to get some. So all you're trying to do is get the less you can get. But when you go from 80-20, you're doing less than doing the 10 lots. But you got to be careful how you change all the other, because you might be defeating your purpose, because in the end of the thing, you want to have 80% of your farmland left. Now, if you come back to the road and do like they did a long time ago, if you do 10-acre tracts, 20-acre tracts, 15-acre tracts, 30-acre tracts, like the farm I live on is all divided up that way, then all your land is gone, but most people still farming it. So the biggest thing is set it up, and it has worked, because since Steve's been here, all that you've got, it's been 2.5 years, nobody's done any rural residential. But they found a hole on the other. So when you cover that hole up, you better not try to make another one unless you want more lots, but you have to be fair with something. So that's all I can say, because I've been through all this. This is 6th time for me, through all the changing and stuff. So I was there when they done the 5 and 10. I live on the farm, right there. And then I was when they done the other. And every time we done it, we made it worse. But this 80-20 has really worked to a certain extent, but all but the family conveyance. And I still don't believe the family conveyance is bad as they said it is, because we don't have any record. They all had to switch at one time because of their son or daughter or grandchild. I was in the deal with the grandchild, but apparently, Phyllis might be able to answer this, they must have changed it some, because when we did it, we didn't want all this other happening what it's happened now. So I don't know how that all come in here, but we got it. And I've said enough. Thank you.
No, that's all right. That's what this is about.
Squire, I think I can address your issue with the family connection. I have seen in family conveyances done in the last several years where you have a parcel of land and you have a husband and wife own it. You want to sell a lot and retain a lot, so you have what has been done, and I think it's legal under the current ordinance, is the husband will convey to the wife a lot, or all the land, all the land, and then the wife will convey back, after the in-family conveyance plat is done, the wife will convey back to the husband the in-family conveyance tract, will retain the rest of the farm, and then they will turn around after 5 years and sell the in-family conveyance lot. So it is a tool. They have used it as a tool to be able to sell a lot off, not necessarily to a family member, and that. I think the way the proposal now is, you wouldn't have, what do you call that, sideways, like between husband and wife. You wouldn't have those types of transfers. You would only have lineal transfers, and lineal downward from ancestor to descendant.
See, when we done the grand survey, because I wasn't in with the other, we didn't mean for that to happen.
No, I think it has, you're right, it has been expanded.
That wasn't supposed to
It has
happen,
been expanded.
but it happened some way.
There's 2 expansions that have occurred since I sat on the commission in 1990, or as a council. The first was the expansion of the definition of who could it can be conveyed to. And the second is, it went from you had to reside on the property to you just had to retain the property, the in-family conveyance tract.
Thank you.
And Madam County Attorney, those have been expansions by changes in the text amendment?
That's correct, yes.
Yes.
That's correct.
So those were done by previous fiscal courts?
Oh, yes,
Yes.
sure. And with good intention, I think. They had, my recollection is, they had citizens come and either to the commission or to the court directly and say, well, we don't like the way this is being applied, can it be changed? And they considered it and they changed it. And then, and then the results maybe are not what we had planned for or hoped for, but.
Judge, can I ask Phyllis for the record, what you talked about, the interspousal, was that even, I don't believe that probably even
I don't think that
came
was
up.
ever anticipated,
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
No.
And I'm also aware of a incident where there was a foreseeable or maybe even they had filed for divorce, and then this was a way to create
Divide their property?
divide the property and create more value to be used in the divorce, which is clearly the opposite of in family. That would be
Yeah, that's,
family division and land division, which I don't think anybody's a big fan of. Squire Varner.
Thank you, Judge. Squire Brown, I think the intent too from P and Z is to, by going back to 10 lots with 2 acres, is to also address the infrastructure problems in the south end, the water and stuff, to kind of, all this is kind of working together to slow it down to, and I know we can go back in some years coming and visit this again if there's a need to make it more lots or smaller lots, but right now we're kind of fighting the infrastructure problem. As you well know, you're fighting it, and Squire Gill's fighting it in the south end to get the water situations. And I know the chief, fire chief's here, and he battles it every day. So I think that's what the intent was, and I don't think there's any malice in it. I think we're just trying to fix some problems or start on some problems. And I kind of agree with staying with the 10 lots of 2 acres, and then when they use the road frontage up, then that'll dictate further lots. So, thank you.
Square, what I was talking about, and maybe some of that, is when you start changing all this, you're back in just like she was talking about, it's changed another way. If you don't do it, it's okay to cut that, I'm not saying that. But you gotta be careful what else you let come behind that, as far as the road and everything, because if you're gonna keep 80%, it's a fine line there. If you start letting this and that, you won't have it. So if you don't stay with it, you'll make it worse. Because you can everybody should ride the roads. You can come right down McCown's Ferry and see 3 farms that nothing's been done yet. And you can see the other farms that's been done. And then you can see the small communities. This last lot has been done on McCown's Ferry. It's exactly 1/2 a mile from the post. That's the last piece of property can be done there. And they've had that property now for 48 years. But somebody's come along and offered them money for it, but that's all can be done. And a lot of that has been done, but you're going to have a little bit of that left. But most of all that stuff, like keep talking about Millville, right at the end is 1.5 miles. I done that myself. You start changing that, say, if you start going further out, you can go in. But most of it's been done because of creek and stuff, and you can't really do nothing else with it. But you're gonna have a few you can. But you're trying to change it, do right. The family conveyance is the only thing that really got away of it. The 30-acre tracts are working. So I'm just saying, be careful how much you change and how you change it, because it can change something and then somebody else can prove something we can't prove, and you're out of it anyway. So that's all I'm trying to say.
So, the clerk has some information on the in-family conveyance numbers, I think.
The left is 2016 to 2022, and the right is 2022 to present. Yes, thank you. There's 8 of each.
Okay, so we're gonna get those printed and distributed. On the right, will you scroll down there, Madam Clerk, please?
Oh, yeah.
Keep going.
Big pickup.
So this is,
Big pickup.
2022 is the right?
Yes.
That's since 2022?
2022 to 2024 is on the right side.
Okay.
Judge,
Yes.
can I say
Squire
something?
Brown.
See, the bottom area where if you go back up at 22,
Yes, sir.
okay, you see there, Hiffner Road, Deer Haven?
Yes.
Okay, that was on the last thing they had, and they tried to do a family conveyance on it.
Thanks, Kenneth.
And I called Steve on it, because when I seen it, and I said, I don't understand what you're doing, because I know that piece of property and I farmed it, and they put the houses on it, which that's all could be. And he says, well, I think they can still do it. I said, well, you need to check it, because, and then they had a meeting on it, so they withdrawed it, because they see they couldn't. And I know 2 or 3 pieces of property I talked to him about. It was family conveyance done, and then they looked at the property and they said, well, it's some other stuff you might be able to do. Well, all that is what we used to call it as green space. Now they're calling it something else, open space or whatever. It's real important when you do the rural residential that you know what to because they let them sell to each other whatever if you own a piece of property. But that green space has got to stay on it, don't you're going to try to develop it again when somebody comes along, and you got to make sure we don't do that. So I've been involved in at least 2 or 3 pieces of property that they tried to, and Trey Shot was another one. And then they come with Trey Shot this last time, and they changed it around, and I hope that green space went with the other ones, which I don't think it did. I got to find out about it, because if you know somebody else comes in and you court, you're going to try to redevelop that. And that could already probably been developed if I hadn't asked a question. I'm not against it, but I reckon what I'm trying to say is whatever we make, we got to stay with it. Because the 6 years I've been, the 6 terms, 4 years that they've always changed something, they really made it worse. Is what we, as far as the growth or having stuff done.
For those farms, right now the farm definition is the acreage in a farm as of, I believe it's July 13th or 16th, 1990. That was the effective date. And so whatever size farm you had at that time, that determined your development rights.
Yes.
There. And then you had to decide how you wanted to develop. Did you want to develop a subdivision off the road, or did you want to utilize less lots and put them on the road? Because then you were limited in what you could do. What I don't know, and I don't know if you can answer this question or not, but is how successfully the zoning has been able to track that and keep up with that, because to me, the whole idea of the rural residential, it was, as you were saying, to preserve as much farmland as possible. And so they sort of landed on this side of, well, if we can preserve 80% of farmland and keep it in use as farmland, then we can give up 20% for people who want to live in the country. And so every one of those farms if you don't develop all the rights at one time, you've still got development rights. And I know that zoning has to track all that, so I don't know how that's done, but it's a massive effort, I think, and they may have tools. Kenneth, can you address any of that? Do you know how they keep up with all that? But
You may come to the podium.
I was not expecting to be called on. I should have listened to the clerk and stayed in my office.
You don't have to answer.
Well, I can answer enough, but I'm not the authority. That's
Understand.
going to be the director. It is very, very, very challenging to track.
right,
Like I had mentioned to several of the magistrates, and by using the 1990 maps that were adopted, they're paper maps, they're in a binder. You can't overlay them over top of existing current digital data. You have to kind of try to figure out what they were looking like on the GIS map and then find them inside the paper maps. There is not a solid way to keep track of how the lots were broke up. You have to always go back to the paper copy, see what the size was, go over to the digital map, and then start kind of counting and remembering how the parcels were broke out, I believe is what Steve's method is and Patty's method was. So to answer your question, it's challenging. It's very challenging to keep up with what has been and hasn't not been split already. And if overstepped, I'm sorry.
No.
that's what I thought too. Thank you.
Squire Gill?
Thank you. Thanks for this information. This is really helpful. So between 2016 and 2022, there were 4 to 9 in-family conveyances per year. The maximum was in 2017, I believe. But since I think September of 22, so for through 2024, so for 2 years, there were a total of 24. And I think that has a direct correlation to the value of property in Woodford County has gone through the roof. And a lot of these, you can look at the situation and see that it's speculating. It's we want to sell off a little piece of the property and earn some money, and that's what they're doing. Just the way what you described, Phyllis, with conveying the whole thing to the wife, and the wife conveys back to the husband, and then they sell part of it. So yeah, I think this just gives more proof to the fact that we need to do something to rein this in while we can.
Judge, could I ask one more thing that'll show, because I'm not on committee, but since he brought that up, I went back, I reckon on the map and stuff, 13 different pieces of property. And for it to work now, I don't know how it was in 90, it's got to be on the plat that you did do the property. So in 90, they didn't do that because right now, everything that they've done, they've got it on the plat because I went back. I believe everything. Everything that I tried to find, every one of them had it on there. And the date and all that on the plat. So all them others should be, because if it's not, who's done something and we don't know. So we're wasting our time doing this if it ain't on the plat so you can see. Because none of us might not be here. And the only reason y'all know what I'm saying now is because I've been here 22 years and I've seen this do everything. Lawsuits and threats, and so it's some way we got to have it on everything we do so somebody else will know. I think, or don't, we just spinning our wheels, and then 25 years from today you do whatever you want to, and that's not what it's all about to make it right, I wouldn't think. I'll be quiet.
No, that's what this is for, Squire Brown. You don't have to be quiet.
You're right.
Squire Gill?
I guess on to number 4. Are you okay with that? Are you any more discussion on number 3?
let me, any other thing with number 3? Number 4.
Okay, the conveyed parcel may not be less than 5 acres, because by law in Kentucky, 5 acres is a farm. I know people have stated that, people will buy 5-acre lots and then they just mow them. Well, people have 10 and 30-acre lots that they just mow, but by law, that could be a farm. So I say the conveyed parcel cannot be less than 5 acres, and it should be located on a public road to avoid problems with finding the house in emergencies and having to go down a gravel road and providing services that the county has to provide to these people. And that's all I have on that.
And so under your recommendation, Squire Gill, if I may, and if you would yield to a question, the primary farm parcel would essentially have to be 35 acres or less in order to partake in the proposed form of in-family conveyance that you're setting up.
35 acres or more.
Or more,
Yes,
correct.
yes, that's correct.
But so if you had 30 acres, there's nothing you could do.
Correct,
If you had 32 acres, there's nothing you can do.
correct.
34.999,
You got
there's
it.
nothing you can do. Okay, I'm just making that abundantly clear. So, if you would yield to another question, I think I know the answer, but in your understanding, why would you use the term located on a public road? What if it was a private road?
Well, for my reasoning is that a private road could be a dirt road, a rock road, and I've been up a zillion times with my kids over the years, and they're not navigable. And I can't imagine an ambulance going up that to provide services to some of these. So they could say, well, that's the primary road to the primary residence, and we want the house right next to it. And the problem would be when on this private road, they go to sell that to someone else, they're going to have to deal with easements, and it's going to be landlocked, and it's just, I think, simpler and cleaner if we keep it to a public road.
And I appreciate that explanation. I was thinking of more well-maintained private roads in the county, which would essentially limit that if there's any that would be impacted by that.
I can't answer that.
Well, I don't know that anyone has that information, but I was just considering that aspect of it.
Yeah.
So, on number 4, other comments or questions? Yeah, Squire Brown?
See, again, that's why I'm saying about if you do the rural residential and you stay off the road 400 feet and you do 80-20, if you're not careful about coming back to the road, because it's set up for one road to take care of all of it. That's why they done it, because they want to keep the road frontage. Let one road take care of, now it'll be 10 houses, let one road take care of 10 houses, plus a family conveyance, so you just have one road. They can be, if they make it our standards, it can be a county road. If it don't, it can be like Deer Haven, it'd be a single road, and you take care of the whole road, and a lot of rural residential is that way. But it's the people that own the property can say yes or nay what they want to do, and then the people buy the property, they can say, yeah, but the secret to it is one road takes care of all the houses, where you don't have 7 or 8. Because we already done that once, and then you use all your land up. So that's I'm talking about things that I've already seen it happen, that you got to be careful bringing it back unless that's what you want. Because a rural residential, if you're gonna have to keep it 10 years, if you don't live there, you're gonna have that property there and nothing with it, which I reckon it'd be all right.
Well, and one thing that,
Can,
yeah, Squire
Can I
Gill.
can I answer that? Squire Brown, these are two different things. You cannot do an in-family conveyance on rural residential and residual farmland. That would be that's a separate mechanism to divide your land up, the rural residential is. You can't put in-family conveyance on that because it's either rural residential or rural residential residual farmland. But if you wanted to do an in-family conveyance and you had your 35 acres and you had enough road frontage, then you could do an in-family conveyance there. But you can't, I may be wrong, but I don't think you can mix those two. I mean, you do one or the other, but you can't do an in-family conveyance on rural residential land. It's either one or the other.
Well, they're doing it now. When they divide it up, because they give it, see, they don't sell.
Squire Brown, you mind to speak into the mic so we can all share
They don't sell the land, they give it to them. And I don't even think you even have to pay taxes on it till you do sell it or live on it. Because when they give it to them, you got 5 years to live on the farm. You can build right then and there. You don't have to wait no time. But then when they give it to them, they don't want to live on there for right now. You have to keep it 5 years. But they can build on it the same day you give it to them. If they get okay from the health department and stuff, you can build right then and there. And it didn't have anything to do with rural residential. Now, they might take it off of your land when you go to do rural residential, but that's why they wanted to go back 400 feet, because they didn't want houses scattered over the whole farm, and they want to use the same road. So again, I'm going back to say, be careful how you change it, because you're getting into stuff you don't know about. And again, I don't care how you do it, but you just want to be sure to do it as best as we can for everybody.
There were a couple of objectives, I think, as I recall, in the 1990 discussion. One was, if you want to build on the road, which at the time, remember, the big gripe was piano key developments, because you do about 10 acres, 10 acres, 10 acres, and you had piano key development. So they were trying to avoid that. But in a compromise, I believe, they said, if you're going to develop on the road, you're limited to how many lots you can develop. If you're willing to put in the infrastructure of the road, then you can go back and use your full component of lots. But I think terminology is important here. You start out with A1 land, agricultural land, just farmland. And then if you're going to do a rural residential development, you submit a plat, at least right now you do, this could change. You submit a plat where you show the development of your lots that you're allowed, and those are the rural residential lots. Then the rest of your farm should be designated rural residual, and that's your 80%, and it should not be further touched, if that clarifies things. But it may be happening. I'm not saying, Squire Brown, it's not happening, but that was not the intent. The intent was that the rural residual would be preserved.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. But if you did come to the road and you want to put one on the road, I think instead of having 15 lots, if you had 100 acres, you had 7 or 8 or 9. So you got penalized for that. You still didn't have all your acres. That's why again, I keep repeating, it's to be careful how you change it, because then you can be messing up then. Because if you do anything different, they want it, because they didn't want any more piano keys. And really, they gave up the rural residential for it just to get that, because they wasn't going to get the rural residential if they hadn't done something with the family conveyance. Because see, just like me, I got 16 and a half acres. At one time, I still got a lot left. But when I bought it and everything and developed it, there wasn't nothing said about the rural residential. But then they changed it to be able to do some of that.
So we do think there's a scenario where people are taking their rural residential residual farmland and then in-family conveyancing off that?
I don't think you can.
But there's a suggestion maybe that that's happened.
That is, as far as I know, I didn't think that was possible. It's worth looking into, but I
Squire
didn't
If
think
you
that
do
you
do
could.
that, what happens when you decide to do your rural residential? You lose the lots. If you don't go 400 feet off, you do one, too close to the road. If you got 100 acres, you get to do 9. You penalize yourself for that one rural residential. You're going to be keeping more than 80% because they're not going to give you 15 lots because you didn't do what you're supposed to do with it to be able to get it. That's why it's not really back then, because you can put it in where you want to, but if you didn't, I reckon it's still the same way, they just cut it. You know, you automatically don't have that many lots.
And to make a clarification between rural residential, the rural residential compromise of the past was to keep at least 80% of agricultural land farmland, and the 20% would be for folks to live on it. The in-family conveyance is a completely separate policy item
Yes.
That's correct.
that may or may not being conflated when people are doing things. We don't know. But I would think that, to Squire Brown's point, is there a scenario where the 80-20 rural residential rule would then be lost or watered down or diminished by the proposed changes? I know that that's in the remainder of the article that we're discussing, but I'm trying to get to the bottom of Squire Brown's point. Squire Gill.
Thank you. To answer your question is no. The rural residential, and I'm not even addressing rural residential in any of this. This is just exception
Yes.
lots and in-family
I'm
conveyance.
aware of that.
But the rural residential, the changes that they've made in it are very simple. They still have the 400 feet off the road, and that's one. So if you had your 100 acres, you could do 10 lots, rural residential lots. You'd have to put your infrastructure in. They'd have to be 2 acres apiece. You'd have to preserve 80% of that farmland. Nothing else can be done there. You can't go back and do an in-family conveyance. That you cannot do that. If somebody got away with it, I think it's outside of the ordinance.
Yes.
If they did. Or you could, if you had 100 acres, you could give 30 acres to somebody. Or if you had wanted to do in-family conveyance, you could do 2 lots, 5-acre lots, or more if you wanted, but a minimum of 5 acres, and they would have to be on the road. So if you had 100 acres, you could potentially get 2 at the most on that 100 acres. And so it's not like they're going to go and put 10 on the road. You know, the most you could get in that would be 2 in that scenario. And then there are tenant homes, there are accessory dwellings, there are other mechanisms that you could use. But I don't think you can't overlap. Rural residential is really strict. I live in one of those. You can't do anything but farm that land.
Yeah, that's what you. Now,
Yes,
Judge,
Squire Brown.
if you get Trey Shots pole run, you can see what I'm talking about. He done 3 or 4 family conveyance, then he turned around and done his rural residential. It's right on the plat. Let's get it. It's already been done. If he hadn't went back off of it, he wouldn't have got that much. So.
I'm sorry, I'm
But
interrupting.
we got 2 different situations here. What we got, when you say family conveyance, a lot of people, if they give them, if they do a rural residential, they won't be doing a family conveyance.
Right.
But everything y'all doing, you're getting ready to change it. But everything was intact with the other, because Trey Shots already done that out there.
What Trey did was he did a rural residential zone, but he's reserving lots for his kids in that rural residential zone. He's not going to put them on the road. They have to be back there.
No, that's
They're
what
the
I'm
lots.
saying. They got to be back off the road, or
Right.
didn't, it would be it, but he still got it on there.
But he's just giving those lots in the rural residential zone to their children. That's not the same as carving off another 5 acres of that rural residential.
No, he
For
didn't
in-family
carve it off. What he
conveyance.
done, he had the acres to do a full rural residential,
Right.
and then plus he had the acres to give the kid the lots. It's right on the plat. I've
Yep.
already looked at all of it.
So
So what would be the
to your
difference?
point, Squire Brown, to your
Yeah.
point, that in the inverse, in-family conveyance can be used and then rural residential can be used following that, just not
Yeah.
the other way around. And that's an
Not
example.
coming to the road and stuff, that's just an example.
Yes.
Because he done it the way, now, when you change all this, you can change it any way you want to. But it's being done right now. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
And then the law let them do it, so, but now when you change all this, I reckon you can change it any way you want to. Whatever you feel is the best way at the time. But I'm just trying to explain to you what's going on, so when you do all the changing, we'll get to be, try to do it the best we can, is all I'm saying.
Yes, yes, sir. And I think this will touch on a point that we've discussed earlier, which I think is close to what you're saying. The goal should be not to create something that if we need to go back and fix in a few years. The goal should be to create something that's certain, common sense, understandable, and fair, so that as we move forward, we will not likely need to do any sort of amendments. That way we fully explore any of the consequences or unintended consequences of any policy decision, and therefore what they've done in the past is these type of rules last for a long period of time, and they manage expectations and they manage development. So I do agree with that. Squire Gill?
Any more on the 5 acres? Anybody have any thoughts on that? People had said 10 acres, but then people said that's just too restrictive and it would be too difficult. And they thought 5 acres was reasonable for the in-family conveyance. But I didn't know what your thoughts were on that. Welcome them.
Anyone have any thoughts or preference on Squire Taylor?
Thank you, Judge.
Hold on one second. We gotta get your audio in. I know Squire Downey, you need to go. I'm gonna when I get your
You all are still in committee.
audio up, you want to make some parting comments. I know you had a test. Go ahead and talk.
For me or
Yeah, I'm gonna go. Squire Downey, I know you had a deadline to meet, so I was gonna let you have any parting comments or you had something in the chat there, so you're recognized.
one thing I wanted to mention in addition to some of the points that have been brought up by Phyllis and Squire Gill, was just the potential to discuss a potential impact fee. I know Squire Varner maybe has hit on this a little bit, just given our infrastructure need for our water districts. So again, not sure if this ordinance is something that can address that, but just wanted that to be brought up as a discussion as well. So I apologize, I do have to run. I will join back as soon as I can.
Thank you, Squire Downey. Squire Taylor, you're recognized.
Thank you, Judge. I've struggled a little bit on this 1 acre, 2 acre, 5 acre max or minimum. I think that Squire Gill's comment or suggestion rather on the affidavit stating that farming is occurring on all parcels could be a good way to affirm if it is 5 acres or more that they are in fact farming. But if it's just going to be a house there for folks to live on the property, it may not need to be to that 5 acres level, and maybe more of it could be retained for farming particularly. So I don't have a great answer to that other than I think that if somebody has 34 acres and wants to convey to one child, having that restriction of 30 acres or only allowing one in-family conveyance or two depending on the sizes, may still impact our goal, or may still ensure our goal, but may preclude folks from getting that additional home on the property and allowing for financing on that home based on them being deeded that property.
Thank you, Squire Taylor. Other comments, Squire Varner, sir?
Thank you, Judge. And to what Squire Taylor said, the 5 acres, I'm good with the 5 acres because you can do the in-family conveyance, and also you could farm that because you can put your yard fence anywhere you want it and still leave some of that acres in your farming practice. But also, I think the 5 acres, and I'm just kind of doing some thinking here for the KRS, is that right now in your district, Squire Gill and Sycamore States, we have smaller lots that folks are growing gardens to provide for their family. And I think that's where this 5 acres came from. It was providing for your family. And you did have enough acres to do something, so they put 5 acres, probably some of the thinking. But I'm good with the 5 acres in the size. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Squire Varner. Other questions or comments regarding number 4?
May I ask one thing?
Yes, Squire
Are
Brown.
you good with it off the road or on the road? The 5 acres?
I am, my thoughts on that is next to the road, because if we do off the road, then as we talk, the infrastructure of the roads and the essential services getting there could be a problem. And like I say, Judge, and to your point, I know since this in-family conveyance came in, we thought then that this was going to be the end all to it, but now we're at this point we're having to look at. So anything we do is going to have to be looked at down the line, I think, in my personal opinion, at some point. But right now, to kind of get to the part to where we need to be from the folks asking for us to look at it, I think this is going in the right direction.
Judge, may I ask one more question?
Squire Brown.
With that, say if you have 100 acres and they do the 5 acres, will you be able to come back and do the rural residential then?
Not the way it's going to come,
No.
the way it's been proposed, no.
So if you do any rural residential on any land, are you going to be able to come back and do the rural? I mean, if you do the family conveyance on any land, 100 acres, are you going to be able to do rural residential then?
I'm
No.
not sure from
No,
what
I
I'm
can answer
understanding that you could do.
No. Now, if you had 200 acres, you could do rural residential on 100 acres, and you could do in-family conveyance on the other 100 acres. But if you have 100 acres and you want to do rural residential, you can't do an in-family conveyance on that property. It's one or the other.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is, in other words, okay, if you have 100 acres and you're going to have to keep it 10 years for family conveyance, and all you really got left is a farm then. That's all you can do with it is farm it. So
Yeah.
why would anybody doing a rural residential on any land or anything, because you're going to have to keep your farm anyway. So you really didn't do anything. I mean, you really ain't accomplished. I mean, you stop growth, and if that's what you want to do, it's fine. But really, you hadn't. I don't know. I mean, why would anybody come and want to do a residential on 100 acres, but you have 200 acres and you can do something? Or you have a 30-acre tract, because they're not going to get to do anything else with their 35-acre tract. You can have a rural residential on a 35-acre tract, but you can't own a 100-acre tract, and then you can't do nothing else with it. I mean, I don't understand any of that.
It's that way right now. if you have 100 acres, right now, if you have 100 acres, you can put 15 1-acre lots on there, but still reserve 80% of that for farmland. And you can't go back and do an in-family conveyance. You're done. You've made your choice
We're doing it
on
right
development.
now, Mary Ann.
Well, I'd have to see
Trey
it.
Schatz, well, it's right in the plan.
Okay, well, we'll have to look at that.
Yeah, it's there, I guarantee you.
Scargill, you have the floor.
Okay, right now, the only changes in this amendment is it's going to increase the acreage requirement for the rural residential lots to 2 acres. And you can only do a maximum of 10 instead of 15. So you're decreasing the number of houses in the rural residential zone, if you get that, on your 100 acres. And the rest of that 80% of that farmland, you're agreeing that that will not be developed forever. And then, so you cannot go back and do an in-family conveyance on that same property. That can't happen. Now, if it's already happened, I don't know anything about that. It may have, but by the ordinance, you can't do that. That should not. If it's happened, it shouldn't have been.
And I think that, to your point, Scargill, that is correct, that, and we do not have an example of that happening,
All
whereas.
you have to do is go get the deeds.
Okay.
Looked it up, they looked it up for me. Because I asked why that he got, but see, what you're missing is he already had the acres where he could do that. So y'all changed it, if you're going to change it where if you do a family conveyance and you can't do nothing else to your land, they're not going to do it in wait 10 years. I mean, that'll be gone. I would think. But
I think the order of it's important, and I don't know the specific situation you're talking about, Squire Brown, but I would presume that what happened was he developed an in-family conveyance tract, and he did not create residual farmland until after that. I agree with the Squire. Once he creates residual farmland, you can't do anything with that residual farmland except use it for agricultural purposes, as defined under the ordinance. So he may have done his in-family conveyance and then come in and used up the rest of his lot availability with a rural residential development, and then preserved it and then had his residual. And so he might have gotten both, but I think the order is important in how he did that.
well, the order I thought was in on the family conveyance. If you got 100 acres and you got too close to the road, you lost 8 or 9 lots. You could still do and I believe it's in there right now.
You might have. I can't address that.
That was one reason why people went off the road. That's the only reason they put it 400 feet, so they would not use the road. But when you change stuff, you change it any way you want to.
So we're turning to number 4, Squire. Are we, any more comments or questions on that proposed piece of it?
I don't have any. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none. The number 5, both primary and conveyed parcels must be held for 15 years. You want to explain that, Squire Gill?
That number, the 5 years is obviously not adequate. And we are asking that both the primary and the conveyed parcels be held, because right now they're not. And so they're doing this in-family conveyance and immediately selling a lot. So it's a way to carve off a small lot immediately and turn a profit. And the whole point of this is to save farmland, and that's not saving farmland. So it might be best to hold both the primary and the conveyed parcels for 15 years and can only be sold by judicial action, which would be death or bankruptcy or divorce. They'd have to...
Foreclosure,
right. And really, that's all I have to say on that.
And you believe that the 15 years is the one you're recommending, or is that?
That's just my opinion, but I'm open to any other
Who was
And
opinions
at
on
the
this.
moment, it would only be conveyed parcels that have the 5-year
Yes,
restriction.
foreclosed has to.
That's correct, right
This
now.
would
And they bank
place the
or whatever.
restriction on the conveyed parcel and the primary parcel.
Requires
Correct.
what was binding that family. They now own it. They're not that family, and it's theirs to do.
That's the way it is now.
Yeah.
too.
So I'd open on the floor for discussion on that, what people are thinking. I know that there's been discussion about the number of years, other extraordinary circumstances that could allow for a sale. In this case, it would just be death or bankruptcy. Squire Varner, you're recognized.
Thank you, Judge. I think with the years being moved up for both the primary parcel and the conveyed parcel is to get the intent of in-family conveyance, that you made a commitment to be there on the farm, through the in-family conveyance the family does. And like Squire Gill said, the number is whatever you decide or think that's the good number. 15 years, that's a good number. It could be any other number, but that's a good number. But I think in the further, I mean, I don't know if a family breaks up, that we need to put that in there as part of the, to sale or whatever. I don't know. That's some discussion we need to have.
I'd be reluctant to add divorce to that because of the reason you stated before, that they could be going through a divorce and they might try to do an in-family conveyance and hold on to it 5 years to try to make more money off of it. And there again, we're not doing anything to save a farm. So I think we should keep the verbiage as what we direct them to do, and they can write it up any way they want. But I think we need to keep this verbiage very simple and concise, so that there's no confusion and it's clear what our intent is. And I think can only be sold by judicial action in case of death or foreclosure.
Should be judicial action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can, hopefully they'll know how to do that. We can revise that.
Other questions or comments? Squire Taylor, did you have something?
Well, I was just gonna say, I do think that we can hope and give strong suggestion to the planning commission on that language, particularly however they and council think that they can best articulate that. But I do appreciate our at a minimum, our suggestion to them could be concise, just like that.
Thank you, Squire Taylor. Squire Varney, you said that there's something that we need to be discussed. Do you have any additional discussion on that?
No, Judge, I was just thinking if that was part of it, we need to discuss it. So I think we did that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. The next item, Squire Gill, if you're prepared to move on, you want to present that?
The property, the conveyed parcel, the conveyed parcel has to be from a parent to a legal child or grandparent to grandchild. Heir, direct heir. That's good.
Parent to legal child.
So, one scenario that has been brought up to me is a aging parent or grandparent basically takes the opportunity under the current rule and deeds 1 acre. They live on that acre, and then they deed the primary parcel to the child or grandchild as a way to provide for them in their old age, and then the child or grandchild gets the primary parcel. I don't know how often that happens. I don't know. I know that it has happened, and we would be precluding that. And there's nothing to say that the child or grandchild is not farming the land. But I think that's something not contemplated in this recommendation. So I don't know if we want to discuss that.
Can I speak to that?
Yes.
if they can do the in-family conveyance right now an acre. If it changes to this, it would be 5 acres. They could still do the in-family conveyance, and after that, they can deed their property however they want it. They can switch it because it's all still held. It's all still, they can sell it to each other. They can return it to the primary parcel if they want to. I don't know how that would, I don't know, maybe our council will have a better opinion on that.
Squire Gill, if that's the intent, then I think if you go back to your primary and platted parcels must be held 15 years unless sold by judicial action. I think you might want to say that both primary and platted parcels must be held by the individuals involved in the in-family conveyance. So if the idea is that the parents could swap to the smaller tract and our grandparents, and then the younger person who's farming gets the other parcel, it maybe make a delineation that it's between those parties, and that it can't be conveyed outside of those parties for 15 years. Would that address your concern, Judge?
Well, I was raising that as a concern brought to me. I don't necessarily share that concern, but I understand what they were saying. And in a time of high inflation and fixed incomes for elderly and those that can't farm the land anymore, that would address those situations. I would like to note that someone with knowledge has shared that the Polo Run in-family conveyances were done first, and then the rural residential was done after.
That's what
That
it
makes
is.
sense.
So that's just to confirm that.
That's,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
but
They did do it.
the reverse can't happen.
But the reverse, we're not aware of a situation in the reverse. I'm not saying that hasn't happened, we're not aware of a situation happening where someone has done a rural residential and then, in a way, in contradiction of the ordinance, then done a in-family. You have information along those lines?
I just have a question that I'm confused about.
Well, so hold on one second. Hold on one second. So there's no opportunity for public comment within this, but if you wanted to write a note and submit it up here, and it's applicable, I will entertain it. Let me return back to the committee. I do think the direct descendant heir language, compared to what is recommended, Squire Gill, I think there needs to be some clarification on that. I think you recognize that. You know, direct descendant, lineage, heir, these are similar words, but they don't mean the same thing, and they definitely don't mean the same thing legally. An heir, Mr. County Attorney, Assistant County Attorney, that can mean an heir at law in a will, right?
Yeah.
Which could be a completely unrelated party.
Who's not?
Could be a niece, nephew, I mean, you could,
Yeah.
depending on, yeah.
So
That's what
I think we keep it simple. I think conveyed from parent to a legal child or grandparent to grandchild. Their legal child is their stepchild, their adopted child, their child by birth.
I'm sorry, did you include stepchild with adopted child?
No.
Okay, I
They're
wanna make
legally
sure.
their child.
Okay.
Even though it's a stepchild.
And Judge, if I may, I do think it's important that you all use or submit that they consider using the precise language, because they also, in Article 2, changed the definition of family member, which still includes the spouses. And what we talked about, you didn't want to see is those interspousal transfers being abused. So make sure there's no reference to family member in this provision, because they changed the definition of family member, which would include those interspousal transactions.
And then, so other questions or comments along those lines? Squire Brown?
I just got my hand up. Well, yeah, I will since you asked.
Sure.
If you do what you're talking about, does that mean that the other contract, I mean, the thing they send us, if you had family conveyance, you could go to the road and you could go on and build on it, or you could go on, build on it, sell it, or do anything. Does this take care of all that, get rid of that other that they asked us to do? Because you're going to do 1 or 2 lots if you had so many acres, and then you could go on and put it on the road and build on it right then and there. Does that take care of that, Mary Ann? Were you saying if you do a rural residence, which you got to keep it, and you can put it on the road if you want to, but you can go on and build on it now, but you can't sell it for 15 years?
Only in the
There's a-
case of the in-family conveyance. The rural residential is completely different. That has to be off the road. You can't, in a rural residential,
I know that has to be up for road, but what I'm asking is, you're doing a family conveyance now on the road. Do you have to keep it 15 years, or can you go on and sell it now?
no, you have to hold it if it's an in-family conveyance for a minimum of 15 years,
Yeah,
all
that's what-
parties involved. Yes.
On the road or not on the road.
Right.
The other one, they said you could go on and do it now, so you're going to take that out. That's going to go bye-bye.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I need to know.
Squire, currently the law is that you hold it for 5 years.
Yeah.
And this is just extending that. There would still have to be a period that attorneys would call it tolling the ability to convey. You'd have a tolled period for 15 years before you could then just say, well, I want to sell it to whomever.
Well, I believe planning and zoning sent it to us where you could go on and do it and have it on the road and go on and sell it, but y'all gonna take that
I
out.
think that's because
It's in what they send us.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I think that's because, in essence, their new proposal really didn't contemplate an in-family conveyance. So what you all are doing now is saying, we'd like for you to bring the in-family conveyance concept back into the ordinance.
Yeah.
I think they're taking it out completely.
Yes.
And
No,
they're just,
they're taking it out, but they were gonna call it something else. And you was gonna go on and get to put it on the road.
well,
now.
but
Yeah,
I think now, after hearing public comment, that you all are thinking about adding it back in with very specific conditions.
Well, I'm glad you said it, because say they said that later years you didn't have it on the map and stuff, or maybe in a plat, if you could do so, they take the family conveyance out. Does that mean that the people that are already got it back, say 20 years ago, do they get to do anything? Or is that off now too?
I would think if you've created an in-family conveyance lot, and you created it, Alan, if you disagree with me, say this. If you created it under the, you have to hold it 5 years, and you hold it 5 years and a day, and you want to convey it, I think you can.
You know, okay, well, they said something about they couldn't really tell how many they done and stuff because of the plats and stuff. So how are you gonna tell now?
Well, remember, I'm looking at it from a title attorney standpoint.
Yeah.
When I look at a title and it involves an in-family conveyance tract, every deed I do under the ordinance requires that I put specific language in about it has to be held 5 years. So now, if this changes,
Well, we
I'll
already
have to
got
put,
that on-
I'll
on
have
the
to put
older
language in that says it has to be held 15. And Squire, I think you should make that a requirement, that there should be specific, that the recommendations or restrictions should be specifically be required to be included in the deed. That way, anybody buying a lot, I mean, an innocent purchaser might think, well, I can buy this, and maybe they can't legally buy it. And so they need to know that. They need to know those restrictions in the deed.
Well, planning and zoning took issue with that point, that they don't have any, they are not involved in deed conveyance at all. But they are involved with creating the plat. And so if you put the restriction on the plat, it seems when you do a title search, you'll see that and see the restriction. But they said that they couldn't enforce that. They could not enforce making sure that got on a deed. That's not from me, that's from planning and zoning. So I think the best we can do is put the restriction on, record it on the plat for right now.
So, just to clarify, the current requirement is that it be recorded in deed. I think planning and zoning, and I'm not gonna speak for them, but my understanding is that that doesn't ever go through them, they don't see it.
Right.
And therefore they can't enforce that piece.
Yes.
But to Phyllis's point, this is an ordinance carrying the weight of law. If you don't do that, then you are in violation of the law, and your title attorney, your deed drafter, is not going to willfully allow you to not abide by a standing local ordinance. So I think the restriction should be on the plat and the deed, and the plat would be the mechanism by which the planning office can see and understand and make sure folks know about that restriction.
I understand that. And I'm fine with that. If we can do it, do it. Anything that
Well, we're
makes
currently
it
doing
clear.
Every deed I prepare that has an in-family conveyance element to it, I put that language. There's certain language I put in the deed. I just think it helps we talk a lot about nefarious intent here, but what if I'm an innocent purchaser coming in wanting to buy a lot and I don't realize that there's a restriction on it? If it's in the deed, it's much more likely to catch my attention than if I have to get a magnifying glass and look on the plat. I just think it's an extra protection. Granted, the zoning commission can't necessarily enforce that, but it's a help for those attorneys who do it. It's a help to people or to their title examiners when they look at the title.
Thank you for that. That's good. That's a good point.
And I concur with that point, and I think the other point, which I believe you're making with number 7, Squire Gill, correct me if I'm wrong, but that the 15-year, under your proposal, the 15-year clock will begin to run upon the recordation of the plat, not the filing of the deed. That's an important,
Say that again, please.
the 15-year in-family conveyance hold upon the parcels of the property will start, the starting time for that will be when the plat is recorded.
Yes.
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 Could I play devil's advocate on that for just a minute?
Yes.
I just want to give you a scenario. I have run, and I'm speaking just here as a title attorney, not assistant county attorney. I have run several titles in the past where there has been a plat, not necessarily in family conveyance plat, just a plat that does something. And let's say consolidating property. And when that plat is recorded and the property's been consolidated, the next step, you have a plat that does that and gives legal effect to that, but you don't have title ownership of that tract as a consolidated tract until you have a deed. Believe it or not, a lot of people think, okay, I get my plat recorded, I'm fine, I don't have to do a deed. I come down maybe 15, 20 years later, I'm doing a title search and there's never been a deed. And I have to explain to those folks, well, you don't have title to this as a consolidated tract until you do a deed. So I think, let's take that in the impoundment conveyance scenario a little bit further. Let's say you create a plat and you let it sit for 15 years, but you never convey the tract off. So after 15 years, you say, well, it's been 15 years, the plat's been recorded, we'll just convey it now to John Smith down the road. Do you want that? If you're okay with that, that's fine. I mean, that's okay because it's been recorded 15 years. They could have done something with it before, they didn't. I mean, that's fine. I just want you to think about, do you want that extra requirement of the deed, or are you okay with it being the recordation of the plat? And either way is fine. I just want you to think about that because that happens more often than you would think.
That was my original content with it, would be on the plat and the deed. It was planning and zoning said they couldn't track it. So I took it off of there, but I think another layer of protection for this is better for everybody involved, for all parties involved. So I think it really should be on the plat and the deed.
Well, then it would be, to answer Judge Kay's point, it would then be upon recordation of the deed, because you're not going to record your deed until the plat's of record, because you can't. So
Okay.
if you want it to, the effective date to toll the 15 years would be the recordation of the deed. Now, zoning can't, you're right, zoning can't track that, but if the ordinance says you hold it 15 years from the recordation of the deed, then it's up to everybody involved to know, I haven't held it for 15 years. And also the purchaser to know, I can't buy this because it's not a legal transaction.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We should have the burden.
So I think we're in an area between legal property transfers and the ability of planning to enforce the restrictions. And what I mean by that is, I think some of the issue is that people are deeding land inadvertently, intentionally, or otherwise in contravenance of the law. They're not following the law, and they're deeding it because planning and zoning will never see that, and therefore they're circumventing the law in a way that if it was required to also be recorded in the plat, then they would see it, and it would clearly pass through their office, and there would be a interaction with the in-family conveyance to say it has happened. The question I think that remains is, when does the clock begin to run? So if if planning and zoning is the one monitoring the clock, then that would be the plat. That's what I think they would, I think that's what the recommendation would be.
They're
From
they're
the
not
planning and
recorded
zoning.
at the same time? You don't record a deed and a plat
To
together?
Phyllis's point, you don't have to do that now.
Oh,
And generally you don't. Generally, if I have a client and the client asks me to do a deed, they say, I'm consolidating, I'm going to take it out of the in-family conveyance, so I'm not pointing fingers to anybody. Let's say they've consolidated property and they want me to do a deed once the plats are a record. They'll call me and they'll say, well, the plat went a record, Kim's taking it down to the county clerk's office today. Well, I'll wait a day or two until I get the plat information, and then I'll do their deed. So the deed is always generally after the plat recordation.
But there could be a circumstance, to your devil's advocacy point, that someone plats it out and they just don't.
They never
transfer.
bother, right,
Yeah,
conveying.
and if
And that
the
may be
time
an
began
innocent,
to run,
yeah,
then it would not run,
right,
right? Technically wouldn't run, which would penalize them.
right.
it would start sometime, and that would be the time that they would have to wait. If they wanted to delay it, it might be 20 years if they decide not to go through with it and get all of these things done. Does that make sense?
So there's an administrative puzzle that needs to be pieced together here. Squire Brown.
Joe, let me ask you, since y'all talking about it, what would happen, you do all that and you plat it and everything, and you don't do anything. And then all of a sudden you decide to sell the farm, but you're still not gonna do anything. So the deed's on it, that it's platted. Can they still sell that because it'd be in somebody else's name, in their son's name or something? Or how would they do it then?
So if it was only platted and not deeded, it would remain in the original landowner's name.
What I'm saying is, if it's gotta be platted and be on the deed to start, it would be on I'd say they'd have it on the deed because they want to start it just as soon as, but something happened, they didn't sell it. And it is a deed there, they can't sell a piece, that acre or 5 acres, can they? Unless the other person signs off or they put it back in their name,
Okay.
because it's
But you're
somebody
talking,
else.
Sorry, Squire Brown, you're talking about a scenario where the original platted in-family conveyance is not deeded, correct? They don't deed the land. It's, I own a piece of property, I'm giving it to my son, so I plat it out, but I don't deed it to my son, right? And then I want to
Well,
sell
you
my
have
whole
to-
property.
You have to deed it to your son for it to be in his name.
Right.
So it will be deeded to your son or whoever you got. I mean, it's what it's gotta be, is what you're saying. Because if it's not deeded to somebody and it's not on the plat, it don't start.
That's right.
Am I understanding that? So
The
then-
current law is definitely that way. I think the question is whether or not we're gonna make a change to, that would be different from that.
Yeah.
I think theoretically, and we're really getting a little theoretical here, you could create a plat, an in-family conveyance plat, and if the tolling time was based upon when the plat was recorded, you could record the plat. You could never convey the tract, and then 15 years later, you decide, I'm going to sell the tract to someone else. If the tolling period started in 15 years, I think I would want to argue against that, but I think you might end up with some litigation on that issue, honestly, because it's the 15 years has passed, and it was the 15 years tolling period starts with the recording of the plat. So you might be able to hold it for 15 years and then convey it to somebody else, because the 15 years is up, and it's a tract of land that's been platted.
Takes the deed out of the.
It takes the deed out of the, the deed has no real effect there because the 15 years has passed.
Lyle,
So-
you got a comment? Sorry, Squire
Go ahead.
Taylor.
Yeah, I was just wondering, the recommended, the thoughts for consideration that was sent to us previously, the conversation about certificate of occupancy really might help. That guideline might really help mitigate some of this discussion, because if someone's building a home on that land, which is what the intention of this is, then they're not gonna get a mortgage or anything else if they don't have a deed to present for a mortgage as well. And so I think that could be a really easy way to not have to get too far into these weeds.
Other questions or comments? No. Squire Gill, so clarify what you want to see in number 7.
Okay, the restrictions must be recorded on the plat. No, okay, I have a question before that. Can you, so you can record a plat without a deed? Can you record a deed without a plat?
No.
Okay. Then it has to be with the deed, I would think. What do you
If
think?
it's non-platted, you can record a parcel, but if there is a parcel that has been platted out, you have to have that legal description in order to be referenced in the legal
But
description.
in this
to convey.
case, you could not, in the agricultural zone, if you had 35 acres or whatever, you couldn't just convey off a 5-acre tract without it being approved by plat as either an in-family conveyance or doing a rural residual, whichever you're going to do, if you have the acreage. So to answer your question, you can't deed land in an agricultural zone without getting it platted first.
I understand.
I'm sorry? Unless it's 30 acres, right, unless it's the minimum, yeah. I mean, if you have a 300-acre farm and you want to deed 30 acres off to someone, you can do that without, you do have to probably you have to get a survey, but you wouldn't have to necessarily have a plat put of record. But if you're doing an in-family conveyance tract, or if you're trying to do a residual, you have to do a plat. You can't just convey the lots.
Yes, and that's pursuant to the statutory requirement of having a valid legal description.
To answer the concern about zoning, being able to administratively enforce these things, my thought would be they will keep up with what's of record in plats. But if you think about it, once a plat's of record, it's in the county clerk's office. So generally, everybody goes down and looks to see if the deeds have been performed on that plat anyway. So I think adding the deed recordation is just an extra element of protection. It's not for everyone, you know. And it doesn't really matter that zoning can't enforce that part. It's there as an extra protection for everyone.
Okay.
And Madam Assistant County Attorney, I think the big thing is when would be the ideal scenario for the clock to run on the years of limitation? Would that be upon the recordation of the plat, or?
I think the deed. I mean, personally, I believe the deed. Because otherwise, like I said, you could have, and this may be far-fetched, but you could have a situation where you plat it, you create an in-family conveyance tract, it's 15 years upon recording of the plat is what starts the time running. After 15 years, you say, okay, I've got a lot here I can convey, I'll convey it to Kenneth. You know, I'm not related to Kenneth, but I'm going to deed it to, transfer it to Kenneth, you know. I mean, and that would, I don't know if anybody would realistically do that for 15 years, but I mean, that could happen.
So do you have a suggestion on how to word number 7 as simply as possible?
It's recorded on the.
Just say that both the primary and platted parcels must be held 15 years, which 15 years will commence upon the recordation of the deed. And I think you would also want to have a statement that the restrictions will be noted on the plat. But
She does have that.
and that's up above anyway.
You're
So.
down there, here, down to the bottom. Okay.
And then the exception would be save and except for judicial action, which would negate the 15 years.
Okay, so.
And I would also suggest, I would also suggest that both the primary and the platted parcels must be held between the parties to the original conveyance for a period not less than 15 years, unless sold by judicial action. Mm-hmm. The 15-year time, the 15 years shall commence upon recording of the deed.
Okay.
Transferring the lot
Okay.
of the property.
So do you want to summarize the changes we've talked about?
Yes, and we need to talk about process as well. So if you want to go ahead and summarize.
Number 1, applicant must be a Woodford County resident. Number 2, affidavit, a planning and zoning approved affidavit must be signed stating that farming is occurring on all parcels. Number 3, the primary farm parcel may never be reduced below 30 acres. In-family conveyance is no longer an option at that point. 1, in-family conveyance for 35 to 49 acres. 2, for 50 acres and above. Number 4, the conveyed parcel may not be less than 5 acres and must be located on a public road. Number 5, both the primary and the conveyed parcels must be held by the parties involved for at least 15 years and can only be sold by judicial action in case of death or foreclosure. It must be conveyed from a parent to a legal child or grandparent to grandchild only. And these restrictions must be recorded on the plat and in the deed. The 15-year time period commences upon recordation of the deed.
So that is the proposed, let me turn on the mic. That'd be the proposed recommendation for the fiscal court to send to the planning commission. So this is something that we didn't discuss, and, you know, I don't think it's gonna be something that folks are particularly pleased with, but I think we tried to have this meeting in order to get something on the April Planning and Zoning Commission. However, I do believe that this recommendation needs to come from the full fiscal court. So, in that circumstance, and this is open for discussion, but I think the recommendation needs to come from the full fiscal court. The ordinance committee can recommend it to the fiscal court, but I think that the fiscal court needs to own this when it leaves this body, not upon recommendation of the committee. So that would be that we would vote on it at our next fiscal court meeting, or at some other meeting that we would choose to have. So what are your thoughts, Squire Gall?
Well, we talked about this at our last fiscal court meeting, and we talked about if we could come up with a recommendation and do an email vote, and then if we can get it to planning and zoning this week, early next week, they can get it advertised. There will be another public hearing. That will be the fourth on this. And so the public will have the opportunity to speak on it. And then it would come at that would be at their April meeting. And then from there, it would come to the fiscal court for approval. My question is it okay to send these recommendations to the full fiscal court and do an email vote? We do email votes all the time.
So we do email approvals, but we don't do major policy decisions via email. Now, Mr. County Attorney?
And I agree with you, Judge, in terms of what email may and has been utilized for.
Yes.
What you may be able to do is rely upon an email vote so that you can do it within their necessary time frame to submit it. But you'd still have to have your formal vote. I guess it's we meet a week from tonight, or
Yes.
From tonight. And if in the highly unlikely event, if there was approval via email vote, that doesn't pass, they will not be able to take it up. So if you're just looking to try to go on and meet their necessary time frame, because we do that, sometimes we might advertise a second reading of an ordinance, but for whatever reason, we can't go forward with it. So let them go on and plan if the email vote indicates majority support. But you do need to formalize that. I agree with the judge, with full vote of the fiscal court. And if for whatever reason you don't get a majority vote next Tuesday, even if you got an email majority, then we would simply have to notify P&Z not to go forward with that.
Okay.
If you all want to try to go on and do this without having to call another special meeting like you called your special committee meeting, but I agree with the judge, it will take at the appropriate time a formal vote of the fiscal court in a regularly called or special called meeting of the entire court.
To that point, email approvals are done and able to move important routine business forward, and they're always ratified in fiscal court. I don't know that we will have the type of consensus in an email approval to move forward. The other thing too is I want the fiscal court to have the opportunity to speak on the record in a public meeting about this. So my recommendation would be, but I am open to discussing it further, would be to wait till the fiscal court on Tuesday.
Okay.
You know, I want to, one thing that I heard in the public comment was to move cautiously and carefully. And I know it's been categorized that we've been moving slowly. I don't want to unnecessarily delay anything, but at the same time, I do feel like short of a special meeting that And I don't even think we could get a special meeting together at this point, with schedules the way that they are. But I think, I don't think, I want to thank you, Squire Gill, for your hard work and effort on this. I appreciate the time and the attention and the level of detail that you've gone into preparing this. That being said, I don't think it will necessarily be unanimously received in either the court or the community. And so we need to make sure that the folks in the community specifically understand we will never rush this process without your opportunity to understand it. Now, as an aside, many government bodies do it legally through open meetings all the time, and but that's not our practice. That's not the way we've conducted business. So I don't think we should move that way, and I'm getting the sense that you would be fine with that. What I would say is, upon a recommendation of the committee, and so we could either take this right now, have a committee vote to recommend it to the full fiscal court, or we can take what we have right here, put it out, have a committee vote on Tuesday, and then recommend it to the full fiscal court for approval Tuesday. Meaning that we would give both the public and our body and this committee more time to think through all that we've gone through today and then be prepared for a vote on Tuesday in committee. Or we can make a recommendation of the committee with a quorum of 3, and then, that recommendation would stand. And if you thought about something after, it couldn't change between now and Tuesday. So that's a little bit restrictive. But because it is your recommendation and you put all the work into it, I want to open the floor for you for your thoughts and discussions on it. And if you don't mind to turn your mic on, please. Thank you.
I don't know. I'd like to see what the rest of the committee, I feel like I'm doing all the talking, and I would really like to know what everybody else and the members of fiscal court here, how they would proceed.
In my former life, I feel like you're the sponsor of this piece of legislation.
It wasn't intended to be that way, but so if we approve this, would you send that for like a straw vote to the fiscal court, and then we'd tell the planning and zoning that, and then we'd actually vote on it, have a real vote? Is that different? Or, I'm fine with waiting. It might put it off another month with planning and zoning, but so be it.
Yeah, so email approval is a straw vote is a different concept than an email approval, in my view of it. So the only thing that we do is our email approvals, which is basically a prior approval that, essentially if we need to pay a bill or to meet a deadline to appoint someone to a committee or a board or commission or something like that. I would not recommend that in this circumstance. And we would completely avoid I believe it would be incorrect, but it could be said that we did it in an email. We made our decision in an email, and that wasn't in the public. For something like this, that's a little bit more challenging to justify. But it could be justified, but we're not, to your point, we've given this a lot of open session and access and time. So this isn't like we got it and we're like, okay, let's shoot it through an email. Squire Varner, let me recognize you.
Judge, I was just with Squire Gill. I know we've been cautious, and we have done our due diligence, I think, as a court. And I know the P&Z has their deadlines, and I guess at this point, I wouldn't want to see it go another month, but I would like to, see us do it like we should do it. I don't know that there's any route to get there before Tuesday, but you know.
Now,
just kinda-
there is, so, you know, our process is different than planning's process. There are no other proposed recommendations. This is what we're going to be moving forward or not. I do think that there could be things in here that people say, you know, because I've heard 20, I've heard 25, I've heard 10, I don't know where the rest of the court is on it. I think we have a good understanding. But my point being is, if the planning commission can be prepared to move forward on an affirmative vote on Tuesday, then with the language as you've recommended it and proposed it, then there's no problem. Should it change, that could mean it's another month out. If they're not comfortable, it could mean it's another month out. But I don't think our decision necessarily precludes their timeline, if that makes sense. Meaning they can go ahead at, you know, unless they say, nope, we're not doing it without a vote, then we couldn't. But I feel like we're flexible, and that's a much more flexible way than doing it than rushing it through an email.
Okay.
I think, in my opinion.
So
Yes.
you're saying that we could meet Tuesday with the court, present it to the court, and vote on it then, and then send it
Yes.
while there's work on it? Okay.
So the committee would meet Tuesday, finalize the recommendation to the court in committee, and the court would
Right.
take a vote. And then the planning commission would be prepared to work off what's been presented.
I'm fine with that. I just want to finish by saying that the amendments to the articles that were presented to us completely removed in-family conveyance. And we heard from the public, and a lot of people want to keep it for the right reasons. And then we also know it's abused, and this is just, if anybody's listening out there, this is just a way to preserve it and to keep it to the original intent of in-family conveyance. And that's what all of this is about. And I'm fine with Tuesday.
Okay, all right.
So do
Other
we need a
questions or
motion?
comments before we conclude? So we will take this under advisement. Madam Clerk, we will have a ordinance committee meeting with this item on the agenda for Tuesday prior to court. I think that's a very productive work session. If there's no other business to come before this committee, then we are adjourned. Thank you all.
My head hurts.
I tell you, mine doesn't.
Thank you.
Don't I know
Thanks
that?
for
Don't I know now?
hanging in there.